Most people fear monsters that break into their homes. But sometimes the monster is the one you hand your house keys to. And in this story, the only witness small enough to see everything was an 11-month-old baby who couldn't speak a single word. The photo arrived at 2:47 a.m. Sarah Mitchell's phone buzzed on a hotel nightstand in Miami, dragging her from the first deep sleep she'd had in months. She reached for it blindly, her body still heavy with exhaustion, expecting a late-night text from her boyfriend checking in on their routine. Instead, the screen illuminated a nightmare. Her son's face stared back at her. 11-month-old Tyler, his soft baby features twisted in an expression no child should wear. His right cheek was swollen, grotesquely purple, a bruise the size and shape of an adult thumbprint blooming beneath his eye like a poisonous flower. But it wasn't the injury that made Sarah's blood turn to ice. It was his eyes. Empty, hollow, not crying, not pleading, just vacant, like something fundamental had been stolen from him. Below the photo, a single line of text from an unknown number. "You should come home. Now." Sarah's scream shattered the 3 a.m. silence. Her roommate jolted awake. Lights flickered on in the hallway. Someone pounded on the wall. But Sarah couldn't hear any of it over the sound of her own heartbeat thundering in her ears. She was already calling Marcus. Straight to voicemail. She called again. Voicemail. Again. Voicemail. Her hands shook so violently she could barely hold the phone as she pulled up the airline website, searching for the next flight to Cleveland. Any flight, any price, it didn't matter. 6 hours until the next departure. 6 hours of not knowing if her baby was alive or dead, if that photo was from 5 minutes ago or 5 hours ago, if the person who sent was trying to help her or taunt her. 6 hours of drowning in a single, devastating question. What had she done? But to understand how we arrived at this moment, this catastrophic collision of trust and betrayal, we need to rewind. We need to go back 12 days to a decision that seemed so simple at the time, so justified, so ordinary. We need to go back to the airport. Thank you for joining us today. Hit the like button if you enjoyed this video, subscribe, and turn on your post notifications. Cleveland Hopkins International Airport was unusually quiet for a Thursday morning. Sarah stood at gate B-17, shifting Tyler's weight on her hip as he babbled and grabbed fistfuls of her hair. At 11 months old, he was getting heavy, already trying to walk, already developing that fierce independence that made her heart swell and break simultaneously. This was the longest she'd ever be away from him. 3 weeks, 21 days. The thought made her chest constrict. Marcus' chin appeared beside her, placing a gentle hand on the small of her back. "Hey," he said softly, reading the panic in her eyes the way he always seemed to. "We talked about this. You need this break. Sarah, you've been running on empty for months." He wasn't wrong. The double shifts at Lou's Diner were grinding her down to nothing. 6 days a week, 10-hour shifts, smiling through exhaustion while carrying plates of pancakes and coffee to customers who never tipped enough. The bills kept coming. The rent kept increasing. Tyler's daycare costs kept climbing. And Sarah kept shrinking, disappearing a little more each day under the weight of single motherhood. When her college friend Jen had offered to pay for the Miami trip. "It's your birthday present. Don't be ridiculous, you're coming." Sarah's first instinct had been to refuse. Good mothers didn't abandon their babies for beach vacations. Good mothers sacrificed everything. But Marcus had insisted. "I've got this," he'd said, bouncing Tyler on his knee while the baby giggled and reached for Marcus's watch. "We're buddies now, aren't we, little man?" And Sarah had wanted so desperately to believe him, to believe that she wasn't alone anymore, that someone actually wanted to help carry the crushing weight of her life. Marcus had appeared 2 months ago like an answer to a prayer she'd been too exhausted to speak. He'd been sitting at the counter at Lou's, ordering coffee and blueberry pancakes, making conversation that didn't feel like the usual creepy diner come-ons. When Tyler, whom Sarah had been forced to bring to work because daycare was closed, started wailing in the back office, Marcus had done something none of the other customers had ever done. He'd offered to help. "I'm great with kids," he'd said with that easy smile. And miraculously, he was, within minutes, Tyler had quieted, mesmerized by Marcus's watch, by his calm voice. Other customers had smiled at the scene, the handsome stranger cradling a crying baby, the exhausted young mother finally catching her breath. By the end of that shift, Marcus had asked for her number. By the end of that week, they'd gone on their first date. By the end of that month, he'd started staying over more nights than not. And now, 2 months later, Marcus was living in her apartment, integrated so completely into her life that Sarah couldn't remember what survival had looked like before him. Maybe that should have been a warning sign. Her sister Emma certainly thought so. "You barely know him," Emma had said when Sarah told her about the living arrangement. "I know him well enough." "Sarah, he moved in after 3 weeks. Don't you think that's..." "That's what, Emma? Fast? Desperate? Wrong." Sarah had felt the old familiar anger rising. "You know what's actually wrong? Being so alone that you bring your baby to work because you have no one else. Working yourself sick because the alternative is eviction? That's wrong. Marcus helps. Why can't you just be happy for me?" Emma had gone quiet on the other end of the phone. "I just want you to be careful. I'm always careful. Maybe too careful. Maybe I deserve something good for once." They hadn't spoken since. 2 weeks of silence, which was fine by Sarah. She was tired of Emma's judgment, Emma's suspicion, Emma's inability to believe that someone might actually want to help without ulterior motives. Flight 2847 to Miami is now boarding Zone 1. The announcement jolted Sarah back to the present. She kissed Tyler's forehead, breathing in that intoxicating baby smell, milk and soap and innocence. "Mommy loves you," she whispered into his soft hair. "So much, baby. So much." She handed him to Marcus, and Tyler went willingly, already reaching for that fascinating watch. Marcus adjusted him expertly on his hip, so natural, so practiced, and smiled at Sarah. "Go have fun. We'll FaceTime every night. I promise." Sarah nodded, not trusting her voice. She grabbed her carry-on, forced herself to walk toward the gate. At the last second, some instinct made her turn back. Marcus was still standing there, Tyler perfectly balanced on his hip. He waved Tyler's little hand at her. Sarah waved back, tears streaming down her face, and disappeared into the jetway. Behind her, Marcus's smile evaporated like mist. He pulled out his phone with his free hand and deleted 3 missed calls from an unknown Cleveland number. The same number had been calling for days. He knew who it was. He knew what they wanted. Payment was due. Marcus looked down at Tyler, who was still reaching for the watch, and felt nothing. No affection. No warmth. Just cold calculation. "Just you and me now, kid," he muttered, walking toward the parking garage. "Let's see how quiet you can be." Marcus Chen's real name was Marcus Thornton. That information existed in a database at the Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation, but nowhere else. Not on social media. Not on background check websites. Not in the minds of the women he'd charmed over the past 3 years. The name changed, but the pattern stayed the same. Find the vulnerable mothers. Gain their trust. Wait, he'd learned the technique by accident in Pittsburgh, living in his aunt's basement between jobs, watching her work as a nanny for wealthy families. She'd come home exhausted every night, complaining about the single mothers who could barely afford her services. "They're so desperate," his aunt had said once, not meaning it cruelly. These women would hand their babies to anyone who offered help. The comment had planted itself in Marcus's mind like a seed in fertile soil. Within 6 months, he'd moved to Cincinnati and tested the theory. Single mother, waitress, working 70-hour weeks. He'd played the devoted boyfriend for 3 months, documenting every moment she left her daughter alone, every time she chose. An extra shift over a pediatrician appointment. Every tiny failure that could be spun as neglect. Then he'd made the call to Rebecca Vasquez. 6 weeks later, the child was gone, voluntarily surrendered by a mother who'd been documented as unstable and negligent. The adoptive parents had paid $75,000 for a healthy infant. Marcus had received $15,000. It was the easiest money he'd ever made. Columbus had been Messier. The little girl at Little Sprouts daycare had been perfect. Single mother working nights, elderly grandmother with dementia, Zero support system. But Marcus had gotten frustrated during nap time when the girl wouldn't stop crying. He'd grab her arm too hard, leaving fingerprint bruises on her tiny bicep. The director had called it an unfortunate misunderstanding and fired him quietly. No police report. No investigation. Marcus had moved to Cleveland before questions could crystallize into consequences. And then he'd found Sarah. Perfect, exhausted, desperate Sarah with her 11-month-old son and her non-existent support system and her complete inability to see red flags waving directly in her face. The sister, Emma, had been a complication, but Sarah's resentment toward Emma had worked beautifully in Marcus's favor. Now, pulling into Sarah's apartment complex with Tyler, sleeping in the back seat, Marcus felt a familiar rush of a plan falling perfectly into place. 3 weeks. That's all he needed. In 3 weeks, he'd have documentation of Sarah's neglect. The fact that she'd abandoned her infant son with a boyfriend of only 2 months, chosen vacation over her child's well-being, failed to check in adequately. Rebecca already had the social worker lined up, the paperwork prepared, the adoptive family selected. Tyler would be gone by the time Sarah returned home, placed in emergency protective custody for his own safety. Sarah would be devastated but helpless. The system would devour her protests, and Marcus would walk away $15,000 richer. He carried the sleeping baby upstairs and laid him in his crib without bothering to change his diaper. Sarah had left detailed instructions, feeding schedules, nap times, emergency contacts, pediatrician information. Marcus left the papers on the kitchen counter, unopened, and grabbed a beer from the fridge. It was 11 a.m. He had plans to meet his friend Jake at the sports bar downtown at noon. Tyler would be fine alone for a few hours. The neighbor to the left was a college student who was never home. The neighbor to the right was an elderly woman who kept to herself. Marcus had made sure to scope out the building before suggesting he move in. As he grabbed his jacket and keys, Tyler started crying in the other room, a soft whimper at first, building to a full-throated wail. Marcus hesitated at the door. Sarah had only been gone 2 hours. If he left now and Tyler screamed the entire time, someone might call. No, he'd checked. The walls were thick. The neighbors minded their own business. Marcus walked out and locked the door behind him, Tyler's cries echoing through the empty apartment. By the time he reached his car, he'd already forgotten about them. Do not forget to subscribe, hit the like button, and turn on post notifications. 15 miles away in Lakewood, Emma Mitchell was trying to work and failing completely. She'd been a nurse at Cleveland Clinic for 8 years, and she was good at her job. Calm under pressure, efficient, compassionate. But today, her hands trembled as she checked an elderly patient's vitals. Her mind kept drifting to Sarah's text from that morning. Leaving for Miami. Marcus has everything he needs. Don't worry. Emma had replied immediately. I always worry. But Sarah hadn't responded. And now, 6 hours later, Emma couldn't shake the gnawing dread in her gut. Emma had raised Sarah from the age of 16, after their mother died in a car accident and their father disappeared into a bottle. She'd learned to cook, to forge signatures on permission slips, to work 2 jobs while finishing high school. When Emma turned 18, she'd taken Sarah and left her father's house forever. She knew what predators looked like. She'd dated one once, a charming man who'd seemed perfect until he wasn't, until Emma had needed a protective order just to feel safe leaving her apartment. And Marcus Chun had every single warning sign. Too charming, too helpful, too eager to isolate Sarah from family, moving too fast, no verifiable past, no friends who visited, no family who called. When Sarah had announced Marcus was moving in after 3 weeks, Emma had tried to explain her concerns. Sarah had accused her of being controlling, jealous, unable to accept happiness. They hadn't spoken in 2 weeks. And now Sarah had left Tyler, sweet, innocent, 11-month-old Tyler, alone with Marcus for 3 weeks. Emma's shift ended at 6 p.m. She told herself she was going home, told herself Sarah was an adult who made her own decisions, told herself to respect boundaries. Instead, she drove to Sarah's apartment complex. She parked across the street, telling herself she'd just check, just make sure the lights were on, just verify everything looked normal. The apartment was completely dark. Emma frowned. Tyler's bedtime wasn't until 8 p.m. Why were all the lights off at 6? She waited, engine idling, telling herself she was overreacting. 6:30 p.m. Still dark. 7 p.m. Still dark. At 7:15 p.m., Marcus walked out of the building alone, got in his car, and drove away. Emma's heart stopped. Tyler was alone. She knew it with sudden, terrible certainty. She waited another agonizing 30 minutes, hoping she was wrong, hoping Marcus would return, hoping. At 7:45 p.m., Emma grabbed the spare key Sarah had given her years ago for emergencies and crossed the street. The building was quiet as she climbed to the 3rd floor. A TV played in one apartment. Music thumped from another, and from Sarah's apartment, she heard the sound that made her blood run cold. Crying. Not loud, not desperate. Just soft, broken whimpers. The sound of a baby who'd been crying so long he'd run out of energy. Emma's hands shook as she unlocked the door. The smell hit her first. Unchanged diaper, sour milk, abandonment. The apartment was dark except for streetlight filtering through the windows, casting everything in sickly yellow. Tyler's toys were scattered across the floor like abandoned casualties. She rushed to his room and found him in his crib, face red and swollen, little fists clenched weakly. His onesie was soaked through with urine and sweat. "Oh, sweetheart," Emma whispered, lifting him out. Tyler clung to her like she was the only solid thing in a tilting world, his cries turning to hiccuping sobs against her shoulder. Emma changed him quickly, fury making her hands shake. His diaper was so heavy it had leaked. His skin was red and irritated. He'd been alone for hours, at least 2, maybe more. And if Marcus was doing this on day 1, what would day 7 look like? Day 14? Emma should call Sarah. Should call the police. Should do something immediate and official. But she'd learned something from her protective order experience. You needed proof. Without evidence, it was just her word against his. And Marcus seemed like exactly the kind of man who could talk his way out of anything, who could make Emma seem like the crazy, jealous sister while he played the concerned boyfriend. No, she needed documentation. She needed evidence so overwhelming that no one could deny it. Emma fed Tyler a bottle, held him until he calmed, laid him back in his crib with fresh clothes and a clean diaper. Then she walked back to her car, grabbed the duffel bag from her trunk. She'd been planning to go to the gym, but the gym could wait, and returned to the apartment. She opened the closet in Tyler's room and started clearing space. If Marcus was going to hurt her nephew, he'd have to do it in front of a witness. Emma was staying. She worked through the night with the precision of someone preparing for war. First, the cameras. Emma had stopped at a tech store on her way home from the hospital earlier, before she knew she'd be moving into her sister's apartment, to buy security cameras for her own place after a recent break-in in her neighborhood, for wireless cameras with cloud storage and phone apps. Now she repurposed them. One inside the stuffed elephant on the shelf above Tyler's crib, angled to capture the entire room. One behind a framed beach photo in the living room. One on top of the refrigerator in the kitchen. One by the front door, positioned to record everyone who entered or left. Each camera streamed directly to Emma's phone. Each had motion activation and timestamps. By 3 a.m., Sarah's apartment had become a surveillance hub, and Sarah didn't even know it. Then came the harder part, becoming invisible. Tyler's closet was small, barely 5 feet wide, but Emma made it work. She removed boxes of old clothes, winter coats Sarah never wore, broken toys waiting to be fixed. She created a space just large enough to sit with her knees drawn up, her back against the wall. She brought in a pillow, a thin blanket, her phone charger, 3 bottles of water, and a box of protein bars. It wasn't comfortable, but it was necessary. From inside the closet, she could hear everything in Tyler's room. The cameras gave her eyes throughout the apartment. And when Marcus left, which Emma suspected would be often, she could emerge, care for Tyler, and disappear before he returned. It wasn't a perfect plan. It was barely a plan at all. But it was all she had. At 6 a.m., Tyler started stirring, making those soft morning sounds that babies make. Emma emerged from the closet, her body already cramping from the awkward position, and lifted him from his crib. "Good morning, sweet boy," she whispered, carrying him to the kitchen. She warmed a bottle, changed his diaper, held him while he drank, and gazed up at her with those trusting brown eyes. She took photos of the apartment. Beer bottles on the counter from Marcus's late night, the unchanged diaper from yesterday still in the trash, Sarah's detailed instruction sheets sitting untouched and pristine. At 7:30 a.m., she heard keys in the lock. 90 seconds. That's all she had to get Tyler back in his crib, hide any evidence of her presence, and vanish into the closet. She made it with 10 seconds to spare. Through the crack in the closet door, Emma watched Marcus stumble into the apartment. Even from across the room, she could smell the alcohol, see the bloodshot eyes, the wrinkled shirt. He'd been out all night. He walked to Tyler's room and stared down at the crib. Tyler, sensing the stranger, started crying immediately. Marcus's face twisted with irritation. "You're still crying? Unbelievable." He turned and walked out. Tyler's cries grew louder, more desperate, more afraid. Emma's fingernails dug crescents into her palms. Every maternal instinct screamed at her to rush out, to comfort him, to remove Tyler from this apartment and this situation immediately. But she needed this. She needed proof. She forced herself to stay hidden, watching on her phone as Marcus returned 10 minutes later with a bottle, not warmed, just straight from the refrigerator. He shoved it at Tyler roughly. The baby choked, cold milk spilling down his chin. "Drink it or don't," Marcus muttered. "I don't care." He left the bottle propped precariously against the crib bumper, a choking hazard, and walked away. Emma waited 5 agonizing minutes after Marcus's bedroom door slammed. Then she emerged, took the bottle, warmed it properly, and fed Tyler while he gazed at her like she was the only safe thing in a dangerous world. "I'm here," she whispered. "Auntie's here. I promise you're safe." But Tyler wasn't safe. Not really. And Emma was beginning to understand that the next 3 weeks would be the longest of her life. Days blurred together in a nightmare routine. Marcus would leave Tyler alone for hours, sometimes 3, sometimes 6, once or almost 8 hours straight. He'd return drunk or hungover or high, annoyed when Tyler cried, rough when forced to interact. He fed Tyler sporadically, forgetting entire meals. He changed diapers only when the smell became unbearable. Emma filled every gap. She became a ghost, materializing when Marcus left, caring for Tyler, then vanishing before his return. She survived on protein bars and bathroom sink water, sleeping in 2-hour increments in the closet, her body cramping and aching and slowly breaking down. The footage accumulated like evidence at a crime scene. Marcus screaming inches from Tyler's face. "Shut up. Just shut up." Marcus yanking Tyler from the crib by one arm, the baby's shoulder twisting at a sickening angle. Marcus eating dinner at the kitchen table, while Tyler wailed in the background, completely ignored. Marcus passing out drunk on the couch at 3 p.m. while Tyler sat in a soiled diaper for 6 hours. Emma documented everything, her heart breaking a little more with each recorded moment. She sent Sarah cheerful texts. "Hope the beach is amazing. You deserve this." Sarah sent back guilt-soaked responses. "I miss him so much. FaceTiming with Marcus tonight. Can't wait to see his face." Those FaceTime calls were carefully choreographed. Marcus would clean Tyler up, feed him, hold him gently while Sarah cooed through the screen. Tyler would smile, baby smile for everyone, and Sarah would cry happy tears, convinced her son was thriving. The moment the call ended, Marcus would dump Tyler back in his crib and leave. Emma wanted to scream the truth, but she needed more. She needed evidence so overwhelming that denial would be impossible. On day 8, Marcus brought someone to the apartment. Emma was in the closet when she heard the front door open and a second set of footsteps. She pulled up the living room camera on her phone. A woman, 50s, professionally dressed in a charcoal suit, carrying an expensive leather briefcase with a small logo, a bird in flight. She moved with the confidence of someone who'd done this before, many times before. Emma couldn't hear their conversation clearly from the closet, but she watched as they sat on the couch, voices low and serious. The woman pulled out a folder, spreading papers across the coffee table. Marcus nodded, pointed toward Tyler's room. The woman stood and walked to Tyler's door. She peered inside at the sleeping baby like she was appraising livestock. Emma's stomach turned. The woman said something to Marcus. He laughed. Actually laughed. Then they left together. Emma's hand shook as she replayed the footage, screenshotting every frame where the woman's face was visible. She zoomed in on the briefcase logo. Bird in flight. She ran a reverse image search on the logo. After 20 minutes of searching, she found it. Compass Adoption Services. No website. No phone number. Just a business registration filed 2 years ago in Columbus with an address that led to a vacant office building. Emma searched. Compass Adoption Services complaints. One result. A Reddit thread from 8 months ago. Quickly deleted but preserved in an archive. A mother in Columbus, asking if anyone had heard of Compass Adoption. She'd voluntarily surrendered her son after being documented as neglectful. But she swore she wasn't neglectful. She'd just been struggling, working too much, relying on her helpful boyfriend, until suddenly CPS was at her door with photos and reports she'd never seen before. The thread had 3 responses before deletion. This happened to my cousin in Cincinnati. Sound like a scam. Get a lawyer. Anyone else notice the boyfriend always disappears right before CPS shows up? Emma sat in the dark closet, Tyler sleeping 10 feet away, and felt the crushing weight of realization. This wasn't just neglect. This wasn't just one bad man making one bad choice. This was organized. This was systematic. This was a machine designed to steal children and profit from their removal. And Tyler was next. On day 11, exhaustion made Emma careless. She'd been surviving on 3 hours of sleep a night for nearly 2 weeks, her body running on pure adrenaline and fury. When Marcus left at 2 p.m., Tyler screaming, unfed since breakfast, Emma waited her usual 5 minutes before emerging. But she was so tired. Her reflexes were slow, her judgment impaired. She didn't hear Marcus's car pull back into the parking lot, didn't hear his footsteps on the stairs. She was standing in the kitchen, Tyler on her hip, warming a bottle in the microwave, when she heard the key in the lock. Emma ran. She made it to Tyler's room, laid him quickly in the crib, and dove into the closet just as the apartment door opened. Her phone, she'd left it on the kitchen counter. Emma pressed herself against the back of the closet, holding her breath, watching through the crack as Marcus walked through the apartment. He moved slowly, looking around like something felt wrong. He appeared in Tyler's doorway, staring at the baby who was suddenly quiet and dry and recently fed. Marcus's eyes narrowed. He walked into the room, scanning every corner. His gaze passed over the closet door. Emma's heart hammered so loudly she was certain he could hear it. Then Tyler started fussing, wanting to be held, and Marcus's attention snapped back to the crib. "You just ate," Marcus muttered, confusion and irritation mixing on his face. "What the hell?" He left the room. Emma waited 10 agonizing minutes, then heard the shower start. She slipped out, grabbed her phone from the kitchen counter, and returned to the closet, her whole body shaking. She pulled up the footage and watched herself on camera, clearly visible, standing in the middle of the kitchen, holding Tyler. If Marcus checked the cameras, if he even knew they existed, but the footage showed him walking past the living room camera without a glance. He didn't know. Yet, Emma couldn't keep doing this. 12 days in the closet, barely eating, barely sleeping. She was making mistakes. And eventually one mistake would be fatal. She needed to end this. Soon, that evening, while Marcus was out again, Emma reviewed all her footage. Hours and hours of neglect, abuse, calculated cruelty. But she needed something concrete. Something a jury couldn't dismiss. Something that would bypass Marcus's charm and Rebecca's lawyers and the system's bureaucratic indifference. She needed the bruise. Emma had watched Marcus's temper escalate over the past week, watched it become rougher, more careless, more openly hostile. It was only a matter of time before he left a permanent mark. She hadn't expected it to happen like this. Day 12. Evening. Marcus came home drunk, not tipsy, not buzzed, but stumbling, slurring, barely able to stand drunk. Tyler had been alone for 5 hours. Emma had fed him 30 minutes ago during Marcus's absence, But baby's Tyler's age needed constant attention. Marcus lurched into Tyler's room and grabbed him from the crib. "Shut up," Marcus slurred, the words sliding together. "Just fucking shut up." Tyler cried harder, terrified by the smell, the roughness, the danger radiating from this man. And Marcus shook him, not gently, not a light jostle. He shook Tyler with violence, with rage, with complete disregard for fragile 11-month-old body in his hands. Tyler's head snapped back and forth like a rag doll. Emma bit her own hand hard enough to draw blood, forcing herself to stay hidden, to let the camera capture everything. Then Marcus lost his grip. Tyler fell. He hit the floor with a sound that Emma would hear in nightmares for the rest of her life. For one eternal moment, everything went silent. Then Tyler screamed, a high-pitched wail of pure pain and terror that seemed to fill the entire world. Marcus stared down at him, swaying. "Shit." He bent down clumsily, picked Tyler up, and saw the mark already forming, a dark purple bruise blooming across the baby's right cheek where he'd hit the floor. "Shit, shit, shit." Marcus put Tyler back in the crib and stumbled out, pulling out his phone. Emma couldn't hear the conversation, but she watched on her camera as Marcus paced the living room, gesturing wildly, his voice rising and falling in panic. Finally, he grabbed his keys and left. Emma was out of the closet in seconds. Tyler's cheek was swelling rapidly, the bruise already spreading. He was crying, but weakly now, exhausted by pain and fear. "I'm so sorry," Emma whispered, lifting him gently. "I'm so sorry, baby." She should have intervened sooner. She should have stopped this before Tyler got hurt. She should have... No, she'd done what was necessary. Now she had irrefutable proof. Emma took photos from every angle, clear, well-lit, time-stamped. Then she pulled out the burner phone she'd bought at the beginning of this nightmare. She selected the most heartbreaking photo, Tyler's bruised face, his tear-filled eyes staring at the camera with that devastating emptiness, and sent it to Sarah's number. "You should come home. Now." Then Emma dialed 911. The operator answered. 911, what's your emergency? Emma heard the front door open. She ended the call. Marcus was back, and he wasn't alone. Emma pressed herself against the closet wall. Tyler clutched her chest, her hand gently covering his mouth. Through the crack in the door, she watched Marcus enter with the woman from day 8. Up close, Emma could see her more clearly. Sharp features, calculating eyes, the bearing of someone accustomed to control. "Let me see him," the woman said. Her voice was calm, clinical. A doctor examining a patient. A businesswoman inspecting inventory. Everything was fine, Marcus was saying, panic making his voice high and tight. He fell. "I didn't mean to." "Marcus." The woman's voice snapped like a whip. "I told you. No visible marks." That was the one rule. Emma held Tyler tighter, feeling his small body trembling against hers. The woman walked to Tyler's room and peered into the crib. Empty, because Tyler was in Emma's arms 3 feet away. She frowned. "Where is he?" Marcus looked into the crib, confusion spreading across his face. "He was right here. The woman turned slowly, her eyes scanning the room with predatory intelligence. Emma's heart stopped. This was it. This was how she'd be discovered. How everything would unravel. How Marcus would spin this into Emma being the danger, the intruder, the threat. The woman walked toward the closet. Emma had seconds to decide. Stay hidden and be found? Run and be caught? Tyler squirmed in her arms, making a small sound. The woman's hand reached for the closet door handle. Her phone rang. She stopped, pulled it from her pocket, answered. "Yes." A pause. Another pause. Her expression hardened. "I'll handle it. Give me 2 hours." She ended the call and turned to Marcus. "The mother's coming home early. Did you send her something?" Marcus shook his head frantically. "No, I swear I didn't." "Then who did?" The woman pulled out her own phone and made a call. "We have a situation in Cleveland. Mother's returning early. Baby has visible injuries, possible exposure." Emma's phone in her pocket buzzed with an incoming text. The sound was barely audible. A whisper, a breath, but in the silent room, it was thunder. The woman's head snapped toward the closet. "Marcus," she said quietly, dangerously, "open that closet door. Now!" Marcus moved toward the closet. Emma made her choice. She burst out, Tyler in her arms, and ran. She was faster than drunk, panicked Marcus. But the woman moved with frightening speed, cutting toward the door. Emma dodged, spun, and sprinted into the hallway. "Help!" she screamed, pounding on the nearest door. "Call 911. Child trafficking." The door opened. Mrs. Rodriguez, the elderly neighbor, and Emma shoved past her. "Lock the door, please." Mrs. Rodriguez, bless her, didn't hesitate. She locked the door and reached for her phone. Outside, Emma could hear Marcus and the woman in the hallway, but they didn't knock, didn't make a scene. They were too smart for that. Through the peephole, Emma watched them return to Sarah's apartment and close the door. "What is happening?" Mrs. Rodriguez asked, already dialing. Emma looked down at Tyler, at his bruised face, and then at the elderly woman who was finally doing what should have been done days ago. "I'm saving my nephew," Emma said, her voice breaking. "And I need you to tell the police everything you've heard from this apartment over the past 2 weeks." Mrs. Rodriguez's face hardened with understanding and shame. "The crying," she whispered. "I called the police twice about the crying. They told me everything was fine." "It wasn't fine," Emma said, "and we're going to make sure everyone knows it." Outside, sirens began to wail, growing louder. Sarah's plane was landing in 3 hours. Marcus and the woman had 3 hours to destroy evidence, fabricate alibis, and disappear. But Emma had something they didn't: the truth, and footage to prove it. For police cars arrived within 6 minutes, flooding the third-floor hallway with officers and radios in urgency. 2 officers went to Sarah's apartment. 2 came to Mrs. Rodriguez's door. "Ma'am, we received a 911 call." The officer stopped mid-sentence when he saw Tyler's face. "I need you both to come with me," he said, his tone shifting from procedural to protective. "Right now." Within minutes, paramedics were examining Tyler in the back of an ambulance. The bruise was bad: swelling, discoloration, tenderness, but no internal injuries, no broken bones. Tyler would heal, physically at least. A female detective approached Emma as she sat on the ambulance bumper, still shaking. "I'm Detective Maria Santos. I need you to start from the beginning and tell me everything." Emma told her: the 12 days in the closet, the surveillance cameras, Marcus's pattern of neglect and abuse, the mysterious woman, the Compass Adoption Services connection. Detective Santos's expression grew darker with each detail. "You have footage of all this?" Emma showed her phone. Hours of video, all time-stamped, all cloud-backed. The detective watched Marcus shake Tyler, watched him leave the baby alone for hours, watched the woman examine Tyler's room like she was appraising real estate. "Send all of this to me immediately," Detective Santos said, giving Emma her email. "And don't mention the cameras to anyone else. Understand?" Emma nodded, fingers flying across her phone screen. Across the parking lot, officers were leading Marcus out in handcuffs. He was shouting, performing outrage. "This is insane. I didn't do anything. That woman, Emma, she's the one who hurt him. She broke in. I'm the victim here." But Detective Santos wasn't listening to Marcus. She was speaking urgently into her radio. "All units, be advised we're looking for a white female, approximately 50 to 55, professional attire, leather briefcase. Consider her a person of interest and potentially dangerous." The response crackled back. No one matching that description found in building or immediate area. Rebecca had vanished like smoke. Emma rode with Detective Santos to the police station, Tyler secured in a borrowed car seat. The detective made calls the entire drive. "I need all records of child welfare removals in Ohio over the past 2 years where the mother was single and a boyfriend or male partner filed the initial report." Emma listened as a clerk pulled up the database. "Filtering by your parameters. Jesus, that's 47 cases. How many resulted in private adoptions?" 19. Detective Santos glanced at Emma. How many of those 19 used the same attorney or social worker? Let me check. 6 cases share an attorney, Lawrence Finch, in Columbus. 3 share a social worker, Jennifer Rains, also Columbus. Get me warrants for Finch and Rains. And pull everything on Compass Adoption Services. Business records, tax filings, property, everything. She ended the call and looked at Emma. You may have just exposed the biggest child trafficking operation Ohio has seen in a decade. Emma stared out the window, thinking about those other mothers, the ones who'd lost their children and been told they were unfit, the ones who'd been destroyed by a system that was supposed to protect them. How many children? Emma asked quietly. We don't know yet, but we're going to find out. At the police station, Emma was interviewed for 3 hours. She walked them through every excruciating detail, showed them every piece of footage. Finally, Detective Santos sat across from her with coffee and brutal honesty. Emma, what you did, hiding in that apartment, surveilling without Marcus's knowledge, is legally complicated. A defense attorney will challenge the footage. Emma's stomach dropped. It won't hold up? I'm saying it'll be challenged. But you're Tyler's aunt. You had a key with permission. You witnessed a child in immediate danger and documented it. That gives us a strong argument. She paused. But we need more. We need to find Rebecca Vasquez and connect her to this network. How do we do that? Detective Santos smiled grimly. We already are. Rebecca Vasquez. We got a facial recognition hit from your footage. Her phone pinged, leaving Cleveland 20 minutes after your 911 call. Ohio State Police tried to stop her on I-90. She fled. High-speed chase. Her car crashed near the Pennsylvania border. Emma's breath caught. Is she? Critical condition. Unconscious. But Emma? The detective's smile widened. Her briefcase survived the crash. Know what was inside? Emma shook her head. 23 files. Each one contains a child information. Name, age, medical records, photos. Each one also contains a mother's information and a detailed plan for documentation and removal. Your nephew's file was in there, with a delivery date scheduled for next week. The room spun. There's more, Detective Santos continued. The files reference payments, $50,000 to $120,000 per child. And they reference 3 Cleveland police officers who've been covering for them. The officers who responded to Mrs. Rodriguez's calls and found nothing wrong. Emma thought about those dismissed welfare checks, those ignored cries for help. They're being arrested as we speak, the detective said, along with Finch and Rains in Columbus. This entire network is coming down tonight because you spent 12 days in a closet with a camera. Emma started crying, not from relief, from exhaustion, from the weight of 23 children whose files sat in that briefcase, from the mothers who've been gaslit and broken by a system designed to help them. What happens to Tyler now? She asked. That's up to his mother, who just landed at Cleveland Hopkins. Sarah Mitchell ran through the airport like her soul was on fire. No answer from Marcus. No answer from Emma. No answer at her apartment. Just that photo, Tyler's bruised face, burning in her mind. She burst through the arrival's door and saw the police cars. Her legs almost gave out. Then she saw Emma, standing next to an ambulance, holding Tyler. Tyler! Sarah screamed, pushing past officers and barriers and everything in her way. Emma turned and their eyes met. Sarah ran to them and grabbed Tyler from Emma's arms, collapsing onto the curb, sobbing, holding him so tight he protested. She pulled back and saw the bruise, and something inside her shattered completely. What happened? She gasped. What did he do? Emma sat beside her and told her everything. Sarah listened, her world crumbling and rebuilding itself simultaneously. You were in my apartment for 12 days? She finally said. Emma nodded. You live in a closet? Another nod. Sarah looked at her sister. Really looked. Emma's clothes were wrinkled and stained. Her hair was unwashed. She had dark circles like bruises under her eyes and actual bruises on her knees from crouching in that closet for nearly 2 weeks. She'd done this, all of this, for Tyler, for Sarah. I'm sorry, Sarah whispered. I'm so sorry I didn't listen to you. Don't, Emma said. He fooled you. He's been doing this for years. You tried to warn me. You weren't ready to hear it. They sat in silence, Tyler between them, the chaos of police and paramedics swirling around them like they were the eye of a storm. Detective Santos approached. Ms. Mitchell? Sarah Mitchell? Sarah nodded, unable to speak. I need to ask you some questions about Marcus Thornton. Marcus Chun. Sarah corrected automatically. His real name is Marcus Thornton. He's used at least 4 aliases. I need everything you remember. How you met, what he told you, who he mentioned, where he went. Sarah tried to think through the fog. We met at my diner, Lou's Diner on Cedar. He just showed up one day. Seemed normal. Helpful. Did he ask about Tyler right away? Sarah thought back. Yes, almost immediately. He asked if I was a single mother. Her voice broke. I thought he was being nice. Did he ever mention other children? Other relationships? No. He said he'd moved to Cleveland for a fresh start after a bad breakup. Detective Santos nodded, writing. You're not the first mother he's targeted, Ms. Mitchell. You wouldn't have been the last. What matters is your sister stopped him. Sarah looked at Emma. You saved him. Emma's voice was barely audible. I should have done it sooner. He has a bruise. He's alive. You saved my son. Sarah's voice rose. You saved my son, Emma. They held each other and cried while Tyler dozed between them, exhausted, safe, alive. They stayed at the police station until after midnight. Statements, questions, paperwork. Tyler fell asleep in Sarah's arms, oblivious to the machinery of justice grinding around him. Finally, Detective Santos released them. We'll need you available for follow-up. When this goes to trial, you'll both need to testify. But for tonight, go home. Not that home, Sarah said immediately. I can't go back there. Emma squeezed her hand. You'll stay with me, both of you, as long as you need. In Emma's car, driving through dark Cleveland streets, Sarah finally asked a question burning in her mind. The photo, that was you? Yes. Why didn't you just call me? Why, wait. Emma was quiet for a long moment. Because if I just told you, you might not have believed me. Marcus would have convinced you I was crazy. I needed proof so overwhelming you couldn't deny it. Proof that would hold up in court. I chose a vacation over my son. Sarah, no, let me say this. Sarah's voice shook. I left my baby with a stranger because I was too tired to think straight. Because I wanted to believe someone could make my life easier. I ignored every warning sign. She paused. I'm not a good mother. Stop, Emma said firmly. You're an incredible mother. You work yourself to exhaustion to give Tyler a good life. That doesn't make you bad. It makes you vulnerable. And monsters like Marcus prey specifically on vulnerable mothers. How many? Sarah asked quietly. 23 children in the files they found. Sarah closed her eyes. 23 families. 23 babies stolen under the guise of protection. Emma? Yeah. Thank you for not giving up on us. For saving my son when I couldn't. Emma reached over and squeezed Sarah's hand. That's what sisters do. 6 months later, Sarah sat in the courtroom gallery and watched her sister testify. The defense attorney was vicious. Try and paint Emma as unstable, obsessive, a woman with protective order history who'd violated her sister's privacy. Ms. Mitchell, isn't it true you have a pattern of not trusting men in your sister's life? Emma's voice was steady. I have a pattern of recognizing predators. There's a difference. Based on what exactly? Based on the fact that Marcus moved in after 3 weeks. Based on his non-existent employment history. Based on his social media, only going back 6 months. Based on the fact that he was too eager to be alone with a child he barely knew. So you broke into your sister's apartment. I had a key and hid in a closet for 12 days, documenting his abuse of my infant nephew. Why didn't you call police immediately? Emma's eyes filled with tears, but her voice remained steady. Because I'd watched 2 police officers respond to welfare checks and do nothing. I watched the system fail Tyler twice. I wasn't going to let it fail him a third time. So yes, I waited, and I will carry that guilt for the rest of my life. Sarah watched the jury. They were listening. They understood. The prosecution showed the footage. Marcus shaking Tyler, leaving him alone for hours. The woman examining Tyler's room, like livestock. The courtroom fell silent. The trial lasted 3 weeks. Marcus tried to claim he'd been manipulated, that he hadn't known about the trafficking operation, that he genuinely cared about Sarah and Tyler. Then they played Emma's footage. His testimony collapsed. Lawrence Finch claimed the adoptions were legitimate. The financial records proved otherwise. Jennifer Raines claimed she'd followed protocol. The families she'd evaluated told stories of fabricated reports and coerced surrenders. The 3 police officers claimed they'd responded appropriately. Detective Santos testified about the pattern of dismissed complaints. Rebecca Vasquez never testified. She'd survived the crash, emerged from her coma, and immediately invoked her Fifth Amendment rights. Her silence was damning. The jury deliberated for 3 hours and 42 minutes. Guilty. Guilty on all counts for all defendants. Marcus Thornton, 45 years. Rebecca Vasquez, life without parole. Lawrence Finch, 30 years. Jennifer Raines, 25 years. The 3 officers, 15 years each. Sarah watched Marcus being led away in handcuffs. He looked at her once, a flash of something unreadable. She felt nothing. The man she thought she knew had never existed. Outside the courthouse, Detective Santos approached them. We've located 21 of the 23 children. 14 have been reunited with their biological mothers. The others are in complex situations where adoptive families had no knowledge of the trafficking. We're working to do what's best for each child. The other 2? Emma asked. Santos's expression darkened. Still searching. Rebecca had connections in 6 states. Sarah thought about those 2 children, somewhere out there, living with families who bought them. When you find them, tell me, Sarah said. I will. And Sarah, what you both did, testifying, enduring this trial, you've helped save countless children who might have been targeted next. But Sarah knew the truth. This network was finished, but others existed, would always exist. The fight wasn't over. It would never be over. 1 year after the trial, Sarah sat on a blanket in Wade Oval Park, watching Tyler chase pigeons. He was 2 years old now, running on sturdy legs, laughing every time a bird took flight. The bruise was long gone. The memories existed somewhere in his infant mind, but he showed no signs of trauma. Tyler was happy, safe, thriving. Emma arrived with sandwiches and juice boxes, settling onto the blanket beside her. He's so fast, Emma observed. I can barely keep up anymore. They watched in comfortable silence as Tyler discovered a dandelion and tried to eat it. No, buddy. Sarah called, jogging over. We don't eat flowers. Tyler laughed and threw it at her instead. Emma smiled. This was what she'd hidden in a closet for. This joy, this innocence, this future. Sarah returned, Tyler squirming in her arms. He starts daycare next week. How do you feel? Sarah was quiet, terrified. But I've done everything right this time. Background checks, references, surprise visits. This place is legitimate. You're going to be okay. I know. Sarah paused. It's just hard to trust anyone now. Emma understood. Sarah hadn't dated since Marcus. Maybe wouldn't for years. The betrayal ran too deep. But Sarah was building something meaningful from the ashes. She'd gone back to school for social work, determined to help other vulnerable mothers. She'd started a blog about her experience. The response had been overwhelming. Hundreds of women had reached out with similar stories. Not always trafficking, but always manipulation. Always predators identifying vulnerability and offering exactly what was needed most. Sarah was turning her worst experience into a lifeline for others. Santos called yesterday. Emma said, they found the last 2 children, a boy in Michigan, a girl in Indiana. Both families had no knowledge. The cases are going to court, but it looks like both will be reunited with their mothers. Sarah exhaled slowly. All 23? All 23. Tyler ran back, holding a stick like a sword. Andy M.M., look. Emma took it solemnly. That's an excellent sword. Very knightly. Tyler beamed and ran off. He doesn't remember, Sarah said quietly. No, Emma agreed. Thank God. But we do. We do. And we'll make sure nothing like that ever happens to him again. Sarah took Emma's hand. They'd survived so much together. Their mother's death, their father's abuse, Marcus's betrayal. Each time, they'd emerged stronger. I never apologized properly, Sarah said, for not listening about Marcus, for choosing to believe him over you. Stop. You have nothing to apologize for. I ignored every warning you gave me, because you wanted to believe someone could help. That doesn't make you wrong. It makes you human. Emma squeezed her hand. And I'm sorry for being so controlling, for not trusting you to make your own choices. You raised me. You kept me alive. You saved my son. You don't get to apologize. Years of tension dissolved in the afternoon sun. Tyler ran back, dirt smudged and leaf covered. Mama, Emma, play. Sarah lifted him, spinning him while he shrieked with laughter. Emma watched them and felt peace. Tyler was safe. Sarah was healing. The network was destroyed. It wasn't perfect. There would always be more predators, more vulnerable families, more children at risk. But for today, in this park, with her sister and nephew laughing in the sunshine, it was enough. Emma pulled out her phone and took a photo. Sarah and Tyler silhouetted against the light, captured in a moment of pure, uncomplicated joy. She'd spent 12 days documenting horror. It felt right to document this too. That evening, after Tyler was asleep and Sarah was studying at the kitchen table, Emma's phone buzzed. It was a message from Detective Santos. 3 women came forward today with concerns about men matching Marcus's pattern. Because of your sister's blog, they recognized the warning signs. We're investigating. You may have just saved 3 more children. Emma showed Sarah the message. Sarah read it, tears streaming. It's working. Something good was always going to come from this, Emma said, because you survived, and you chose to help others survive too. We survived, Sarah corrected. Both of us. Emma nodded. Both of us. In Tyler's room, illuminated by a moon-shaped nightlight, a 2-year-old boy slept peacefully, dreaming of pigeons and dandelions and sword sticks, completely unaware of the women who'd fought so fiercely to make sure he'd have the chance to dream at all. 23 children were stolen by this network before it was stopped. 23 mothers were told they were unfit, neglectful, dangerous. 23 families were destroyed by a system designed to protect them. But because one woman spent 12 days in a closet, because one mother found the courage to trust her sister, because 2 women refused to let evil win quietly in the dark, 23 children came home. This story is over. But thousands more are unfolding right now in apartments and houses across the country. Single mothers being targeted by helpful boyfriends. Vulnerable parents being documented by predators posing as saviors. Children being stolen under the guise of protection. The system is supposed to catch this. But the system is run by people, and people can be corrupted. So I'll ask you this. If you saw the signs, would you look away? Would you tell yourself it's not your business, not your problem, not your fight? Or would you be brave enough to hide in a closet for 12 days to save a child you love? Emma Mitchell made her choice. What choice would you make? Leave your answer in the comments below. Thank you for watching. Hit the subscribe button, like, and turn on post notifications.